Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in today, talk about Oshi chapter number 148. This chapter is titled The End of Summer, or actually just End of Summer. I sort of added that "the" in there because I think it sounds better, but I digress. Like I said, today we're here to talk about chapter number 148 of Oshi, and hey, this is a chapter of Oshi that I think we've seen glimpses of this sort of chapter before, but we don't think we've ever had a full-on Oshi beach chapter. Because, oh boy, what did we get this week? An Oshi beach chapter. And as far as beach chapters in anime and manga go, I mean, I feel like most anime and manga are required by law to have a beach chapter, or in the age of filler episodes in anime, filler episodes that were beach episodes for sure, but I don't think we've actually fully gotten one in Oshi, especially how it is portrayed here, because this is a full-on beach chapter. All of the girls are out in their swimsuits and bikinis and yada yada yada. Some jokes going on with that, just a whole thing of on the beach, what's going on here, and just a bunch of really fun things that actively happen in this chapter. Before we get into it, there's a few things, of course, we need to talk about, like what happened last time, and I do find it interesting that we sort of cut to a random spot between last chapter and then this one, because of course last chapter was all about Ruby and her interaction with Hikaru until Akane eventually came in and sort of saved Ruby from being in Hikaru's grasp. And that was a very big deal at the time. Like, it's like, holy crap, it's such a big chapter. And one of the big things is that we learned what Ruby's dream is that she wants to become an idol that's even better than her mom. And whatever goes along with that, we didn't really get too much into that, but we just know that that is her goal going forward. So how that spark and evolve over the series, we'll have some more time to figure it out, right? But this chapter, like I said, is titled The End of Summer, and we open up with most of our main cast on the beach, as we suddenly see that, like, Ruby is there with Kana and Mimcho behind her, and they're all like, oh my gosh, it's the ocean, right? Like, I can't believe it. And Ruby's just, like, running up front as we see just, like, I specifically like how Mimcho's drawn in this scene because it's in that very, like, joke, chibi form, almost, where, like, Mimcho, like, doesn't have any, like, facial expressions, just sort of like that, cat mouth or whatever it's called, the upside, or the W that's rounded off or whatever it is. I am almost certain that thing has a specific name to it, but I just am not being smart right now, so I can't come up with it. But yeah, I'm not gonna like pause the recording here to actively think about this for like the next hour, because it's probably how long it's gonna take me. But we're just gonna skip on from there right now, because yeah, that is the scene here, is that like Ruby's like, oh my gosh, we're at the ocean. As we see, it's not just those three girls here. We also see that Frill Shirani is here, along with Ruby and Frill's other friend from school. I think her name's Minami, if I'm not mistaken. She is the Graveler model who we've seen in the series before, who I think had a big part in the Dig Deep show. I honestly don't remember that arc at all, so I'm sorry if I forget some characters or whatever, but yeah. We see that both Frill and Minami are also here, as we get the note of Frill talking about, like, this beach, it really feels like a private beach, right? And we sort of get some confirmation from Minami, who pretty much says, like, yeah, that's right, this was used for a Graveler magazine photo shoot before, so it sort of does seem like this is a private beach that either they rented, or being that they are part of the general acting and popularity idol industry that they get access to. Not really too much specifically stated on that, but it is just a little bit of an interesting note to be like, oh, so this is a private beach these guys are at, which makes sense while there's nobody else here. We pretty much now just cut over to where Ruby is very hyped up about everything going on here, as she's like, oh man, a private beach, the symbol of a vacation, right? As she's also just like, hey, we're all finally freed from that hellish schedule of the movie, right? As we see that Akane is also here, as we see that she's over here behind Kana, and both of Kana and Akane sort of just go back and forth, being like, oh man, Ruby looks so happy over there, doesn't she? And Akane didn't, to what Kana just says, like, oh yeah, well, she is the lead role in the movie, so it only makes perfect sense that she is so much into this, like, oh my gosh, I'm finally free, right? Makes perfect sense. And then we also, of course, see most of the other people who are here, as we see that Taiki and Aqua are also here, because why wouldn't they be here? As we get, honestly, probably my favorite reference to anything in this chapter. I mean, the end of the chapter is like a whole big deal between the sort of love triangle we have going on here. But just a note here that Taiki's like, oh man, looking at the sea here really reminds me of my car. As we of course see the shot of Taiki's car that he of course crashed in that chapter, what, like a little over 10 chapters ago maybe, or maybe a little bit less than 10 chapters, right? And I love Aqua's response here, and he says like, bro, are you that traumatized over your car? Like, what's going on here, right? And as these two sort of have this reaction, we eventually see the person who brought all of these various kids here. Well, as far as we see, so we see Aqua, Taiki, Ruby, Kana, Akane, Mimcho, Frill, and Minami. So that is just 8 characters here. And we see the person who brought all of those people is none other than director Gotonda, right? As we sort of get to notice, like, Gotonda's like, oh man, why do I do things like a father would do on Sunday? Like what's going on here, right? And Kana's like, oh, well, it's your fault for having a car like this, despite being single. As we see that Gotonda has a Volkswagen for some reason, and he just has it sitting in the background, and it's a big seater, so it can fit all of these characters and all of their stuff in it. As Ruby's just like, yeah, despite being single, right? So we're just putting that all into Gotonda's face, like, hey, you suck, you're single, we're cool, because we're teenagers, right? So we're going to make fun of the older people, because that's what we do, right? But Gotonda eventually just starts, like, cutting these two off. She's like, hey, having a big car is more convenient. I can carry my equipment and drive the entire staff around. Making a movie is a lot of work, you know, so having a big car is a big opportunity for me to make money, right? And Gotonda's eventually like, hey, I would never dream that I'd actually have to use it to take a bunch of brats to the beach, right? As eventually, Akane comes up behind. Gotonda's like, hey, thank you, we really appreciate you bringing us all here today. It's a very good thing we do. But she's like, hey, I can't believe you would actually do this though, director, right? But Gotonda's like, alright, good grief, as, he eventually starts giving out orders to everybody. He's like, alright, the boys, bring down the corner. Next up, pump up the swim rings and all of the boats, and don't forget the umbrellas and all of the sheets, right? And Taiki has another little bit of a joke here, just saying like, oh, it looks like Gotonda is actually slipping into the role of a father figure very easily here, which does make sense because to all of these actor kids, he is the director, so in a way, he sort of is their father in the movie scene, and it is pretty cool to see because, of course, we've seen how Gotonda has sort of taken on a father role in raising Aqua a little bit, because, of course, during the whole initial arc of the story, or at least what was portrayed in Season 1, we see that Aqua has worked, what's the word I'm looking for here? Why can I not speak? Like, I just have this problem sometimes. I have a word, and I just can't think of it. Aqua and Gotonda have worked very closely together in the past, is what I'm trying to get across here, with, of course, the whole Sweet Today movie, or not movie, but the television show where, of course, we saw Aqua play a stalker there, and all of that other various stuff. So we know that Gotonda sort of played the role of a father to Aqua in a way, and in the same way, he's now sort of doing that for this entire movie crew that we're seeing right now. So I do really like that note, and I do think it's a fun one, right? Well, at this point, Aqua just says, like, hey, Gotonda actually bought that car when he was hunting for a marriage partner not too long ago, right? And he's like, hey, Gotonda's one of his actual dreams is that he wanted to go camping with his wife and kids on the weekend, right? As we eventually see that somebody else is like, oh man, how miserable that is, right? Because, I mean, that's just a very human thing of, like, Aqua saying, like, yeah, Gotonda bought this Volkswagen specifically for this purpose of being like, hey, he wants to take his family out on a vacation. It's just a very nice moment that we see here. And that sort of gives a little bit of a more human element to Gotonda, as much as he's being sort of memed on right now, but either way, it's fine. We eventually cut back over to where Minami and Frill are, as the two of them are sort of talking, and Minami's just like, hey, is it okay for me to be here too? Because Minami's not actually acting in the 15-Year Lie movie. She doesn't have a part in it at all. She's sort of just friend of Ruby and friend of Frill, so friend of everybody else. That's sort of her relationship in all of this. So she's just like, and Frill's just like, yeah, sure, why not? You could be here. We asked you to be here, so why is it a problem, right? As we eventually see that there is another character here that I neglected to mention earlier because they just didn't get shown before, and that is, of course, probably my favorite Oshi coach character, just for the pure love that I have for Melt. Because yes, of course, Melt is here. Why wouldn't Melt be here? He's one of the prominent people in the movie. I think he's playing who? I think he's playing Saito in the movie. I may be wrong, or I may be 100% correct. I don't remember, but yeah, Melt is here. That's pretty nice. But we eventually see that Minami starts to talk up some more. As she says, like, hey, but I'm amazed to see everybody here today, even though, I mean, we're all so busy, because, of course, we see that there are 9 people here, 10 if you include Gotono, but 9 kids acting in a movie. As Minami just continues, like, hey, or no, Frill says, like, hey, that's because we were able to wrap up all the filming of the movie earlier, and so, like, hey, we have until today as a backup for shooting, after all, right? And obviously none of that backup shooting involves any of these guys, because, well, they are all out on the beach, so, alright. Minami then just says, like, alright, starting tomorrow, everybody will be super busy again, won't they, right? As, Frill's just like, well, I'm not going to be. She's like, I'm actually taking 2 whole months off so I can slack all that I want, right? As, she's just like, hey, only those who can't interfere with their schedule are busy. Pretty much saying, like, yeah, she can move things around so she can do whatever she wants just because she is so big, popular, and famous. So, that is a little bit of a funny and interesting note there. Just like, yeah, only those who can't interfere with their schedule are busy. I feel like I've heard that before, but I take it I heard this whenever I originally read this Oshinoko chapter some time ago, right? So, yeah. And Minami sort of just has a little note like, oh wow, that's a little crazy, right? It's like the powers of talents can make such a big difference, right? As eventually we see that Mimcho comes over to all of the other people and is like, alright guys, it's finally time, let's all go swimming. After Mimcho, of course, says this, we see that both Taiki and Melt are sitting on a towel, or underneath an umbrella on a towel, of course. And as 2 of these guys are sitting here, I want to quickly point out Melt's appearance, because Melt is wearing a chain around his neck, right? He has his swim trunks on, and he's then wearing 2 slippers. And to me, they do almost look like furry slippers, but of course you can't tell the high definition of them. But they sort of just do look like that to me. And then he's wearing tinted sunglasses they're not like Taiki sunglasses where you can't easily see Taiki's eyes. Like, most of the time you can't actually see Taiki's eyes on the inside, like the reflectors are just going over him. But we can clearly see through Melt's glasses, sort of leading me to believe they're like an orange tint or something like that, which just gives Melt a really, really funny look here, just the way that he's sitting on the beach and he's sort of like all cross-armed. It is just a really funny look to me. But as the 2 of these characters are sitting under this umbrella, of course, we see that both Minami and Ruby walk over, and they both give both Melt and Taiki something to drink, as they're just like, oh, here you go, have something to drink. As we see that, of course, Ruby is in a bikini, and what's it called? Minami is in sort of a more one-piece swimsuit that's all connected, right? As we see the 2 of them sort of just bend down, obviously accentuating all of their breasts and all of their curves and everything. So we're like, oh man, these 2 girls are really hot and they're at the beach, right? And we sort of see that Taiki's just like, oh, thanks, well, that's it, huh? It really is a perk, right? As Mel's just like, alright, dude, don't say whatever you're thinking out loud. It makes you really, really weird. It makes you seem like a big-ass creeper, right? As Mel's just like, hey, for your information, Ruby is your sister, more or less, right? And we then see that, who's his face? Taiki's like, well, now I suddenly have a lot more of mixed feelings about this, right? As Mel's just like, hey, we should also pay more attention to Frill's swimsuit than Ruby's. And she's like, hey, I didn't have much chance to actually interact with Frill while we were filming the movie, but Mel's was like, hey, the truth is, I'm a really, really big fan of her, right? And he's like, so I was honestly excited I got to be invited here where she would be today, right? Obviously showing that Mel does have a crush on Frill, which is a little funny. But at this point, we see that Frill starts to walk behind Mel. And as Mel sort of realizes this, he turns around to see where Frill is. But we see that Frill is wearing an entire snorkel, get up like a deep sea diving sort of gear. She has no skin exposed except for her mouth area and a little bit of her neck, where she has a snorkel and goggles put on, right? And I do love Melt's reaction here of doing the same exact thing that Taiki just said, being like, hey, I suddenly have mixed reactions about all of this, right? As Taiki's just like, hey, she's doing as she pleases, so what's the point of all of that, right? As we suddenly cut away from the scene to over where Aqua is on the beach, as we see that he is pumping up a little bit of a air mattress looking thing. I guess something that you put on the beach and you lay on, as we see a character is about to do. But we see that Taiki's using his foot to pump this thing up, as all of a sudden we see that Kana appears next to him, and Kana is laying on the thing, obviously showing that Aqua had just done this for Kana, right? As we see that Aqua's just standing next to her as Kana's laying on this thing, and we see that pretty much Aqua's being Kana's attendant here, as we see that Kana's just like holds out a little bit of a drink. She's like, hey Aqua, will you help me apply some of this suntan oil, won't you, right? As she says like, hey, Skid is our capital as an entertainer. She's like, so we need to keep it all clean and pristine. As she's like, hey, we must take good care of it in a place like this, so please apply it carefully so that in spots that I cannot reach with my own hands, right? As we suddenly see that Akane is over here now, and she's like, alright, okie dokie, I can do it for you, right? As we see that she squirts some of it on Kana's back, and Kana seems very pissed off, so of course she wanted Aqua to do it, but now Akane's doing it, her sort of foil and rival in all of this scenario, right? As we see that the two of them just sort of bicker back and forth until eventually we see that they sort of start to get along, as we see that even Aqua makes it like, oh man, you two seem to be such good friends, as we sort of just see the two of them hanging out, both Kana and Akane, and then we see that Mimcho, Ruby, and Frill are all messing around, as we see that they have made a sort of a little bit of if I could speak, we see that Frill and Ruby have made a little bit of, have buried Mimcho under the sand and sort of made her like a sand body over top of that. A little bit of a funny scene there. And then we just sort of get a straight page of everybody just sort of playing in the water. We see that Frill is over in a snorkel tube, just like staying up out of the water. As we see that Mimcho and Minami are also just like floating around in the water, flailing around and doing all of that. We see that Gontonda is also splitting open a watermelon for everybody to eat, because of course it is a nice summer day, and we sort of just see that Melt and Ruby are both looking at him very confused, like, Gontonda, what are you doing? You should have better things to be doing here. And we even see that Tsukuyomi is sitting up in a tree. We haven't seen her up to this point in the chapter, but we see that she is sitting in a tree right next to a crow. I don't know if that's hinting at something, because I mean we know she's a crow girl thing, but yeah, she is also here, yada yada yada. As we eventually see that the sun is starting to fade over the horizon, as we see that it is starting to get nighttime out, and we see this effect fully transform, as we eventually see that everything seems to be done for today. Everybody's dying down, everybody's relaxing, as we see that Aqua is sitting up on a cliff that overlooks the ocean, right? We see there's a few trees around him, and he's just looking at the sea, taking it all in. As eventually, we see Akane walk up to Aqua, as she's like, oh, hey Aqua, I see you're isolating yourself again, right? And Aqua's just like, oh, it's you, Akane, right? And he's like, hey, don't you feel awkward being with me? And Akane's like, well, I mean, I do, but I have to watch you. And she says, there is no guarantee that you won't kill Hikaru Kamiki at any time. As Aqua sort of hears her say this, and then sort of just narrows his gaze from the ocean, and sort of points it down at the rocks below, sort of just like not thinking about much of anything at this second, or just sort of averting his gaze from what he was once looking at. As Akane just is like, hey, you shouldn't do that, you know, right? And she says, because if you do, neither you nor the people around you will be happy. As she eventually says, like, hey, look over there. And she's like, as we see that Gontonda, Melt, and Taiki are all sitting around a table next to a campfire. Obviously seems like they're preparing some sort of food, or finishing off some sort of food, is at least what it seems to me. As we just see, like, Akane's like, hey, look, you'll make everybody here sad. Everyone you love and cherish and try to protect. As we see another scene where all of the girls are sort of hanging out, as we see that Ruby, Mimcho, Minami, and Frill are also sort of eating a little bit of food, sitting in chairs, also overlooking the ocean near the fire. As Akane just continues on what she's saying to Aqua, as she says, like, hey, I believe there'll be social sanctions against Kamiki through this movie. Ruby-Shan should have her revenge in a final play. And she eventually says, like, hey, now it is your turn to be happy. As Aqua sort of then just, like, follows his gaze to look over to Akane, as Akane starts to actually walk away from Aqua, sort of after giving her a piece of her mind, or giving him a piece of her mind, if I could talk, which obviously I can't do. What's his face, Akane, or as Aqua looks at Akane, we sort of just get a little bit into Akane's thoughts, as she's just saying, like, hey, I just want to make you happy. That is my only wish, even from the very beginning. I will do whatever it takes for that purpose. As we eventually see, the other character we haven't seen in this little bit of the shots of everybody around, as we see that Kana is also somebody else looking out onto the water, right? And as we see that Akane's walking away, we see that she ends up running into Kana on her way back to the general camp. As Kana is looking out in the ocean, she eventually just, like, knows that Akane's walking past her and just says, like, hey, Akane Kurokawa. And she's like, hey, I'm going to tell you this. As we sort of just see that Akane sort of stops at her tracks from walking along, and sort of just, like, gives a little bit of a gaze towards Kana. As Kana just says, like, hey, I have always liked Aqua, so I know that he's actually the happiest when he's around you. And she's like, hey, it's frustrating, but I really think so. She's like, hey, you better get back together with him as soon as possible. I'm sure that you can actually melt Aqua's heart. As we see a little panel here where Akane is just sort of looking very confused and shocked, as we see that Akane is looking at Akane with a very tinted smile, but obviously a sadness and regret in her voice and in her eyes as she sort of says this to Akane. As we end off this chapter of Oshi no Ko. And for a beach chapter, this really gets a lot of different various things across. As, I mean, of course, it's all the jokes of like, oh, hey, it's the beach, all the girls are here, right? They're in swimsuits, right? Both Taiki and Melt find that very hot in various different ways. Of course, with the whole joke of like, oh, hey, Taiki's like, man, Ruby's sort of hot, but like, oh, man, she's my sister. So I suddenly have mixed feelings about it. And then the exact same thing of Melt and the frill and the full scuba diving gear. It is just a very funny joke for a beach chapter. And then just all the other stuff. Again, the moment Echo toned it in the beginning of like, hey, he had dreams that he never was able to fully realize at this point. So through us, he's sort of getting to realize these things. I do really like that moment, and I do like it a lot. And then eventually, as we get to the very end of the chapter, what is it? The last, or no, it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages, out of the what? 19, I think we get? No, 18. I always forget Oshi no Ko is 18 pages, not like a 19 or something. So, we see it like a little over half the pages of 11 of them are like all the beach various things going on here. And eventually, at the very end of it, just the two conversations that get have between not only Akane and Aqua being like, hey, you're isolating yourself again, like, don't do this to yourself, and like, hey, don't kill Hikari, you're only going to make everybody else sad, and like, I want to protect you, Aqua, that's been my goal from the beginning. And then eventually having the whole thing of kind of like, hey, Akane, I know that Aqua loves you, sort of not knowing that how Aqua fully feels about her at the same time, because of course, so we know that Aqua loves Akane the most out of anybody, right? Kana's the one who can actually melt Aqua's heart, and as much as I love the whole Aqua Akane sort of ship, yeah, you guys get what I'm saying here. But yeah, just a lot of really good conversations, just the sadness you can tell is in Kana's voice. Just really does a great job in this chapter, and yeah, I think this is just a very good chapter all in all. I really have nothing bad to say about anything that happens here. I mean, granted, most of it is just like standard, right, here's some good old Oshi no Ko jokes, and then ending it off with a serious note or two, but there's not really anything too deep and dark to delve into here. I mean, there are just those few character moments, and then eventually the whole general thing as we sort of start to set up our next little bit of a story arc between, of course, the whole love triangle between Aqua, Ruby, and Akane, between all of them. So we will get all of that in the later chapters, I'm sure. And yeah, that's really all I've got to talk about for this chapter of Oshi no Ko. Again, I think it was a very good one. And hey, if you guys did enjoy watching this video and my discussion on this Oshi no Ko chapter, I've done plenty of other Oshi no Ko chapter reviews that will all be linked down in a playlist in the description of this video, so please go check those out. Even just watching a little bit of those would just help me out a bunch. And if you want to help me out even more, hopefully you won't mind leaving a like on the video or even subscribing to the channel, as it is the easiest way that you can support me, with a very easy little bit of a click of a button, right? And you get more Oshi no Ko chapter reviews whenever the chapters come out, or maybe like a few months after chapters come out. I try, I'm sorry. I am just busy at points, and I'm not busy, and I'm busy, and I just try to record videos when I can, and it doesn't always work out how I want it to. But hey, that's life. But yeah, I really don't have anything else to talk about this chapter. I think I got all my feelings across on it, and yeah. Thank you guys so very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time to talk about Oshi no Ko chapter number 149. Of course, this was Oshi no Ko chapter number 148. Oh, there is one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of this chapter. This chapter, again, we get to Star Wars, like, chapter number 148, End of Summer. Last chapter, we, of course, had, like, the line with no star, and I pointed that out last chapter being, like, a weird inconsistency in that chapter, but we have it here, so I don't know if that was just, like, a translation error or something, or if Mingo Yorki and Akasakasa, the authors of the series, forgot to put it in there last chapter. I have no idea. All I know is that it is here now. And with that, I really don't have too much else to say. Great chapter of Oshi no Ko. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma231 signing out. Yeah, Akane and Aqua for the win, baby. Like, that's how it always should be. Woohoo! Bye!